So this is going to be the first video of Chapter 4, Section 4.1 on factoring. So the first kind of factoring that we're going to talk about is usually the first type that you learned back in Algebra 1, and it's all about common factor. And what I want to put down here kind of in our overall list next to common factor is that no matter what the problem looks like, no matter what the expression looks like, no matter how many terms, the first thing you should always try is common factor. So we're going to put here, always try common factor first. So down here next to number 1 for explanations where it says common factor, remember common factor is like the opposite of the distributive property. So for example, if we have 2 times x plus 3, right? If we were to distribute the 2, we would get 2x plus 6. Well, common factor is such that you're going to start with this part and you're not going to know this part here. And so the idea is, what can you take out in front? Like what can you put out in front of your parentheses? Well, in this case, you could take and put a 2 out in front. And then if you divide each of those terms by 2, what you're going to have on the inside is x, because 2 times x is 2x, plus, and then what would you put here for your second term so that when you multiply it, you get the 6. And so this would be the answer if we factored using a common factor. So if I look at this first example, there are 3 terms, and we look at the numbers separate from the variables. So when I look at this, I have 10, 5, and 20. Well, the common factor would be 5, but since they all have a's in them, I could also take out an a squared. And so now in my parentheses, I have to show the 3 things that we're being multiplied by. So something plus something minus something is going to go in here to represent each of those 3 terms. Well, what can I multiply 5a squared by to get 10a to the 7th? Well, it would have to be 2a to the 5th, because remember when you multiply a squared times a to the 5th, you would add your exponents. Okay, what could we multiply the 5a squared by to get 5a to the 4th? Well, all we need there is an a squared. So we just need an a squared. And then finally, what can we multiply the 5a squared by to get the 20? Well, that's going to be a 4. And since I already have the a squared, I don't need any more a. So this would be my answer if I were going to factor using a common factor. I think I'll move that parenthesis in there a little closer right there. Okay, so on the next one, I've got 3 terms. They all have an x and they all have a y. So what would I multiply to get the xy squared? Well, all I need is a y plus, in this case, I think I'm going to need an x and a y squared plus, and I think this time I just need x squared. So I'm done, but you always know if you got it right, because if you were to distribute that to all 3, you should end up with what you started with. Okay, now the next one is kind of where we really jump into the Algebra 2 level. So if you notice this, there are actually 2 big ugly terms. This is one big ugly term and this is one big ugly term. And do you see that both of them have an x minus y? Both of them have the same parenthesis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a parenthesis of x minus y out in front. It's kind of like that's my common factor. And now what am I going to have left? Something plus something that will give me the original. Well, if I take the parenthesis out of the first term, all I have left is 2x. And if I take the parenthesis out of the second term, all I have left is 6y. So this is just to show that sometimes your common factor is not just a number like it was up here with a variable, or on the second example, all we had for common factors were variables. But in this case, your common factor might be a whole parenthesis. Okay, so that's common factor. Now, once you've tried common factor, then what the kind of factoring you choose depends on how many terms there are. So if there are 2 terms, you're going to use difference of squares, difference of squares. Okay, so this one is usually pretty common. So difference of squares, this comes from, think about if you were to do FOIL, if you were to multiply, let's say, x plus 3 times x minus 3, if you multiply, the first is going to be x squared, and the outer is going to be minus 3x, and the inner is going to be plus 3x, and the last would be minus 9. But do you notice when you combine your outer and inner, they cancel out. So all you have is x squared minus 9. Okay, well this is what we call a difference of squares, because do you see the x squared is a perfect square, difference means minus, and the 9 is a perfect square. So right, squares would be something like 9, 16, 25, 36, and so on. So the good thing about these is if they're both squares, you automatically know how to factor it and you don't have to check anything. So when I look at letter A, there's two terms. They're both squares. 121 is 11 times 11. So automatically I put down my two parentheses. It's going to be x plus 11, x minus 11. Nothing to have to check. Works every time. On letter B, they're both squares, right? 36 is 6 times 6, so two parentheses. Now, make sure that your parentheses are in the same order as the original. On letter A, the x was first and the number was second. But on letter B, the number is first and the letter is second. So when I factor, it's going to be 6 plus A, 6 minus A. Notice I have the 6 first and then the A second. On letter C, they're both squares. So P plus Q and P minus Q. On letter D, even though that second square is more involved, 100 is a perfect square. So this is going to be 3 plus 10AB and 3 minus 10AB. And then the last one, I know the x to the fourth looks a little strange, but it's still a perfect square. So two parentheses, it's going to be a 5x squared, because when you multiply 5x squared times itself, you'll get 25x to the fourth, right? Always a plus and a minus, and then to get the 49, we're going to need 7y times 7y. Nothing to have to check. So those are nice because you automatically know what the factored form is, and you don't have to check anything. Okay. The next thing we look at is, well, what if there are three terms? Well, if there are three terms, we're going to use trial and error. And this is the one that we're going to kind of spend some time on. So for trial and error, we're going to go down to the next page where it says three terms. So for three terms, you're always going to do trial and error. And just like the name says, you might try something, check and see if it works, and if it doesn't work, then you have to try something else. But the good thing is, if you follow these helpful hints, then you'll be able to get it right on the first time most of the time. There won't be that much trial and error. Okay, so as soon as you see that you have three terms and you're going to do trial and error, the first thing you always do is just automatically put down your two parentheses. So if we do example A down here at the same time that we kind of go through the information. So as soon as letter A, as soon as I see the three terms, I automatically put down my two parentheses. And then the second thing that we'll do is decide on signs. So decide the signs. And by signs, I mean whether or not you're going to use plus or minus. Okay, and you're going to decide the signs based on the last sign. So if you look down here at our example, you have 6x squared plus 17. Plus is the first sign. This plus is the first one. And then the last sign right here is that plus. Okay, so if the last sign is a plus, then you know that you want the same sign, meaning both plus or both minus in your parentheses. Now, how do I know if I want them to both be plus or both be minus? Well, you look at the first sign right there. So the order that this is going to be is I'm going to say, okay, because of that last sign, they're the same. And then because of the first one, I know they're the same of plus. Similarly, we're going to come back to this in a minute, but just to kind of show you what I'm talking about, if you look at letter D, you see your three terms. You automatically put down your two parentheses. So I look at that plus, and that means they're the same. What are they the same of? Oh, look, that's a minus, so they're the same of minus. Okay, if I were to look down here at letter F, three terms, so I set up my two parentheses. This says they're the same. What are they the same of? They're both minus. Okay, so if that last term is a plus, we know we have the same sign, but if that last term is a minus, then you know you have different signs, meaning one is a plus and one is a minus. So when I look at letter B, I got my two parentheses. So I look this, that says, oh, they're different. I don't have to look at the first one because as soon as I know they're different, I'm automatically going to put a plus and a minus. Or if I look down here at letter C, I got my two parentheses. I see that that last one is a minus. I'm not even looking at the first one. I automatically know I have a plus and a minus. Okay? So now let's go on to the next part. You're going to place the first term in each parenthesis. Well, think about it. If you were to multiply this out using FOIL, right, wouldn't this one times this one, wouldn't that be your first, and it would come out to equal the 6x squared? So I need to decide, what am I going to multiply to get 6x squared? Well, obviously they're going to each have an x, so it's a matter of, do I want it to be 6x times 1x, or do I want 3x times 2x? And we are going to always pick the 3x and the 2x, okay? And that's one of my first helpful hints. Always start with the smaller numbers, all right? So to multiply and get 6, instead of 6 and 1, I want 3 and 2. Now, does that mean it's guaranteed to work? No, but we're playing the odds. That means most of the time, the 3 and 2 will work, okay? So now we're going to place the last term in each parenthesis. Okay, so I need to decide what's going to go here and what's going to go here. Well, again, think about it. If I were multiplying these parentheses out, doing my FOIL, when I multiply these two, right, the last terms, isn't that what's going to come out to equal the 12? So I have to think about, well, what am I going to multiply to get 12? So I could do 4 and 3, 6 and 2, 12 and 1. Again, we're going to play the odds, and we're going to pick the smaller one, so we're going to pick 4 and 3. But here's where the next helpful hint comes in. So I've decided I'm going to pick 4 and 3, but I can tell you right now, I am not going to put the 3 over here. Why? Because if I put a 3 in that parenthesis would have a common factor, and that will never happen. Okay, so my helpful hint here is never have common factor in a parenthesis. So if I decide, hey, I want a 4 and a 3, I know I have to put the 4 here and I have to put the 3 here. Now, does that mean it's guaranteed that this is going to work? No. The last step is I have to check. And the way we check it is you look at the O and the I of the FOIL. Well, O and I mean outer and inner. So if I multiply my outer, I've got 9x. If I multiply my inner, I've got 8x. And in order for this to work, those have to add to be the middle term. Well, that's 17x, so I know it works. Okay? So let's look at letter B. I've already got my signs, right? I knew they were different because of that last minus. So now the first terms have to multiply to be 5x squared. Well, I don't have any choice. It has to be 5x times x, right? And then I know my last numbers have to multiply to be 10. So I could either pick 5 and 2 or 10 and 1. But like we said, we always start with the smaller. So I'm going to start with the 5 and 2. And I know I'm not going to put the 5 in here because I would have a common factor. So I have to put the 2 here, which means I have to put the 5 here. So again, am I guaranteed this is going to work? No, I have to check it. So my outer is negative 25x. My inner is positive 2x. And that gives me negative 23x. Well, is that my middle term? It's close. My middle term is positive 23x. But I have the 23. If you have the right number, that's good as gold. Because if you have the right number, don't move any of the numbers around, But if you don't want the negative, if you want it to be positive, all you have to do is come up here and switch the signs. In other words, make this that what we had a minus, make that be a plus, and this one that we had a plus, make that be a minus. Now you can check it to make sure it works, but it will. So if all you want to do is change the sign right there, then you just switch the order of the signs you had. Okay, let's try another one. So on this one, first we already decided our signs are different. So in order to multiply and get 18, right, I've got 18 and 1, 9 and 2, 6 and 3. So we start with the smaller ones, the 6 and 3. Okay, in order to multiply and get 12, we've got lots of choices, but the smallest choices would be 3 and 4. And I can tell you right now, I can't use 3 and 4 because I couldn't put either one of them in here with the 6. If I put a 3, I'd have a common factor. If I put the 4, I'd have a common factor. That means I can't use 3 and 4. What about 6 and 2? Again, I wouldn't be able to put either one of them in this first parenthesis. I'd have a common factor. What about 12 and 1? I can't put the 12 in either parenthesis because I'd have a common factor. So what does that mean? That means automatically I know 6 and 3 won't work. So instead of 6x and 3x, I'm going to go 9x and 2x. And I know it seems like we tried a lot of things, but we did those in just a matter of seconds. So now, in order to multiply and get the 12, start over again with the 3 and 4. But if I choose 3 and 4, I'm going to have to put the 3 here so that I don't have a common factor and the 4 here. Okay, so let's check and make sure that works. Outer is negative 27. Inner is positive 8. And that does give me a middle term of negative 19. Okay, look at letter D. We've already decided that they're the same of minus. So multiply to get 18, I would go start with 6 and 3, because those are the smallest. Now, in order to multiply and get 8, if I started with 4 and 2, I know that won't work here because I'd have a common factor. What about 8 and 1? Well, I can't put the 8 here, but I could put the 1 here, which means I would put the 8 here. Okay, so I'm going to check and see if this works. So my outer is negative 48 and my inner is negative 3. I don't even have to try to combine those. There's no way that's going to be 25. So I know that's not going to work. Okay, so that means I already said 4 and 2 wouldn't work, 8 and 1 wouldn't work. So that means I'm going to start over. Instead of 6 and 3, I'll go 9 and 2. So 9 and 2. So we start over with the 8, 4, and 2. Again, I can't put either one here, right? I can't put 4 or 2. But if I do 8 and 1, I could put the 8 here and the 1 here. Okay, so now we check. So on the outer, I'm going to have negative 9. On the inner, I'm going to have negative 16. And that does give me that middle term, negative 25. Okay? Go another one here. So I've got my two parentheses. Because of that minus, I know they're different, so a plus and a minus. Only way to get 5x squared is going to be 5x and x. And then in order to multiply and get 21, I would start with 7 and 3. And since I'm not going to have a common factor either way, I don't know, I'll just start with 7 here and 3 here. So on the outer, negative 15. On the inner, positive 7. I don't even have to really do the addition or subtraction. I know that's not going to give me 16. So does that mean 7 and 3 don't work? Well, maybe I need to switch the 7 and 3. Maybe I put the 3 here and the 7 here. So on the outer, I'm going to have negative 35. Well, if I want, I could go ahead and check the inner to be 3x. But just looking at that 35, I know that's not going to give me 16. So does that mean 7 and 3 don't work? Well, that definitely means 7 and 3 don't work. So what other options do I have? Well, what about 21 and 1? So let's say I put the 21 here and the 1 here. So on the outer, I have negative 5x. On the inner, I have positive 21x. And I think that's going to work. That will give me that 16x. Okay, one last one we'll try together. We already said we're going to have the same sign of minus. I know I have to have a 5x and an x. No choice there. Okay, so now in order to multiply and get 6, so I know I'm going to start with 3 and 2. It's just a matter of where I put them. And I'm not even thinking about it. I'm just going to randomly try 3 and 2. So on the outer, we've got negative 10. And on the inner, we've got negative 3. That does not give me negative 11, right? Okay, so does that mean 3 and 2 don't work? Well, no. What if I try switching them? What if I put the 2 here and the 3 here? So now I've got negative 15 and negative 2. That gives me negative 17. That's not negative 11. So that means I've tried the 2 and 3 in both places. That means 2 and 3 are not going to work. So now I'm going to try 6 and 1. So I'll try 6 and 1. Let's see, 6. Okay, let's try 6 and 1. So on the outer, I've got negative 5. On the inner, I've got negative 6. If my pen would write, I would have negative 6. Negative 6. And that is going to work, right? That's going to give me negative 11. So that works. All right, so that's the first part of 4.1. In the next video, we'll cover the rest of 4.1.